I'm Terry Smith, and this is my story. It's funny how quickly life can flip. It all began the day I went fishing with my buddies Mike and Ben. My wife, Mandy, had been at her office for about an hour when she got a call that would change everything. "Is this Mandy Smith?" the caller asked. "Yes, it is. How can I help you?" "We've taken your husband and demand a ransom of $250,000. You have 24 hours to gather the money, or he dies. If you contact the police, he dies. I'll call again at 3 p.m. with instructions on how to get the money." "Is this a prank?" "Who are you?" Mandy was terrified and in shock. She didn't know what to do. "I was on a fishing trip with friends at Blue Lake for 3 days. I didn't bring my cell phone because we didn't want any distractions. My friends and I were on my boat, drinking beer and fishing, having a great time. We rarely got out like this, and we cherished every moment. My boat was sizable, a 35-footer that could comfortably fit 6 people. Although we rented a cabin for the night for the past 6 years, we've done this annual camping and fishing trip." While I was chugging another beer, the Coast Guard sped up to us and stopped beside the boat with guns drawn. They asked, "Is one of you Terry Smith?" "That's me," I replied. "What's going on?" "Sorry, sir, but we were asked to find you. We were informed you've been kidnapped and are being held for ransom." "I assure you, I'm fine. These are my friends, Mike and Ben. They're also my employees. We came here to fish for a few days, and we decided to leave our phones behind to avoid interruptions. Could you please point your weapons elsewhere?" "Excuse me, Mr. Smith. We'd like to board your boat and take a look around. Do you have any weapons on board?" "Just the standard flare gun and other emergency items you'd expect on a yacht. Come aboard." They quickly searched the yacht and checked our IDs. After that, they apologized but asked if I would go with them. The police needed to talk to me at home. "Mike, Ben, go ahead and enjoy the fishing. I'll see if I can get back tonight or tomorrow. There's no sense in spoiling your vacation. If I don't return, dock the boat securely, clean, and lock the cabin, and drop the keys." I left with the Coast Guard and headed for shore. I met Mike and Ben in prison 12 years ago. I was convicted of receiving stolen property, which I'll explain later. Mike and Ben also met in prison, serving time for assault and battery after catching their wives cheating. They could have faced attempted murder charges, but took plea deals for assault and battery. Needless to say, they both divorced. In prison, we became close friends and had each other's backs. When I was released after 3 years, I promised to help them when they were up for parole. My father owned an auto parts warehouse, and after he passed away a year after my release, I took over the business. Mike and Ben were paroled, and with job offers from us, they were released. Parole happened 8 years ago, and both men thanked my father and me. They were great employees and are now good friends. They started new lives, even got married, and had families. They were grateful to my dad and me for helping them. They continued to work for us and were well paid. The police drove me home since I didn't have a car. When I walked in, Mandy ran up and hugged me. "Thank God you're safe. I was so worried." "Where have you been?" "On the lake, fishing, until the Coast Guard showed up with guns." "What the hell is going on?" A man stepped forward. "I'm Detective Carter. I'm handling this case. We need to know your whereabouts for the last 24 hours. You guys took me away from my fishing trip, and I want to know why before I say anything." "Fair enough. Your wife called us this morning saying she received a call at work informing her that you were kidnapped and demanding a ransom of $250,000. The caller said they would call your house at 3 p.m. We have everything set up and are waiting for the call." This must be some sick joke. Who would try to kidnap me? I own a warehouse in Trailer Park. Are they after auto parts or a used lawnmower? "Mandy, did they say anything else?" "They said you have 24 hours to raise the money or you die. If I contacted the police, you would die." The caller said he would give instructions on how to get the money at 3 p.m. "You called the police despite the threat?" I said, shaking my head. God, if this was real, I could be dead. "Mr. Smith, your wife made the right decision. She didn't know what to do. There was no way she could handle this on her own. Easy for you to say. It wasn't your life at stake. What's going to happen now? I'm fine. Can't you all just leave? Mr. Smith, we have to take every threat seriously. We'll stay and see if another call comes in. Now, would you mind telling us your whereabouts for the last 24 hours? Of course. Mike and Ben picked me up early yesterday morning. We rented a cabin on the lake for 4 days. We drove there, took my boat out, and went fishing. We arrived in the evening, cooked a meal, ate, and relaxed in the cabin. This morning, we had breakfast and were on the lake until the Coast Guard showed up. You know the rest. It was almost 3 p.m., and the detective and his team had set up a phone beacon on the kitchen table. Mandy would talk to the caller if they called. I was in the living room with 2 other detectives, drinking coffee. There was a speakerphone so we could all hear the conversation. Detective Carter asked Mandy to tell me that she had contacted a lawyer to help raise the money in case of a call. The detective would play the role of the lawyer. I just shook my head, thinking, damn it, I could be fishing. The phone rang at exactly 3 p.m., and Mandy answered. Mrs. Smith, it's good you came home early to take my call. Do you have the money ready? The voice was disguised. Not yet. I've contacted a lawyer to help me get the money, Mandy replied. What? I told you that if you contacted anyone, your husband would be dead. Did you contact the police too? No, only a lawyer. I didn't know how to collect that money. You just told me not to call the police. Please don't hurt my husband. Put that damn lawyer on. She handed the phone to Detective Carter. This is John Wells, the Smith's attorney. What exactly do you need? We need the money, or Smith dies. Is that clear enough? If we find out you or Mrs. Smith contacted the authorities, he dies. This isn't a game. I'm not playing either. Before we hand over that kind of money, we need proof that you have Mr. Smith and that he's alive. A commotion was heard on the other end of the phone. Then we all heard a voice. Mandy, it's me. Gary, these masked men kidnapped me right after you left the hotel this morning. Please give them what they want. Then we heard a bang, like someone had been punched. Damn it, I said. That's my brother Gary. What the hell does he mean you were with him this morning? As you can see, Mandy, we know you lied to us. Was that your husband yelling in the background? Does he know you were with his brother? Looks like we got the wrong Smith. You see, we were told that Mr. Smith had gone on vacation for a few days. We saw you leave your house yesterday morning and followed you to your hotel. Your room was registered to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, so we assumed it was your husband. After you left the hotel this morning, we kidnapped the wrong Mr. Smith. He told us repeatedly that we had the wrong man. We didn't believe him until he told us he had a twin brother. What do you want now that you don't have Terry Smith? The detective asked, posing as the lawyer. $300,000 by 9 a.m. tomorrow, or Gary dies. The extra money is for the lies we endured. Tomorrow morning, we'll call and give you the drop-off location for the money. No more games? The caller hung up, and I started yelling at Mandy. You got him, cheat. Now you're having an affair with my brother. I won't give a dime to save him. The kidnappers can save me the trouble. 2 officers restrained me and asked me to calm down. I walked to the refrigerator, got a beer, and turned on the TV. I want nothing to do with my cheating brother or my cheating wife. Once this farce is over, we're getting a divorce. The detective told Mandy that he needed to know her every move from the moment she left the house the previous morning. She was upset and crying, but I ignored her. Mandy explained to the detective, trying to speak quietly, but I heard everything. She met Gary at the hotel. His wife thought he was out of town. They had been lovers for months. I was getting more and more enraged. After dinner last night, we went to our room. I'm not going to tell you about how we made love, Mandy said. I cringed. Love-making? Gary never loved anyone. He just wanted to get what he wanted. Neither Mandy nor Gary ever denied what I said. After that day, Gary and I rarely saw each other. We kept in touch, but Gary stayed away from Mandy. After graduating college, he took a job as a sales rep for a window and siding company. He often traveled, meeting many women. He lived large because of the women he dated. It's been 12 years since I married Mandy. We had a good marriage, but I always had suspicions. Our kids were fine, and because of them, I never gave cheating a second thought. Just about then, my father got sick. He had a stroke, but seemed to cope. I called Gary and asked if he wanted to join the business. He laughed and said he wanted nothing to do with our junkyard. Dad was disappointed, but I assured him I'd always be there. One day, a man came in with several cars he wanted to get rid of. Dad made an under-the-table offer, and the man accepted. Unfortunately, Dad had done this several times to avoid paying extra taxes and never checked the VIN numbers. A few days later, law enforcement came with a search warrant. Apparently, the man who sold the cars to Dad tipped off the police. They found the cars and were preparing to arrest Dad for receiving stolen property. There was no way I was letting Dad go to jail. I stepped forward and said, "Sir, I accepted these cars. My father never knew. I was going to handle the registration but didn't have time." All they needed was an arrest. I was arrested, pleaded guilty, and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. My father was distraught and said he'd do anything for me. I hugged him, and he tearfully apologized. The day I was sent away, I knew Dad wouldn't survive prison. He had a bad heart, and I didn't want him to die alone. Mandy left me and filed for divorce 2 months after I was sent to prison. She took the kids and soon married an insurance agent. I was upset about losing the kids, but said to hell with her. I corresponded regularly with Dad, who visited me monthly. His cousins helped him run the business while I was in prison. In jail, I met Mike and Ben. They seemed decent. Each had beaten up their wife's lover, landing them in the hospital. I understood that. I almost did it to my own brother. I promised to help them upon their parole, and my father agreed to hire them. After serving 3 years of my 5-year sentence, I was released. Dad made me part owner of the business. He said that way, when he died, it would be mine, and Gary couldn't claim it. His cousins managed the business well, so we kept them. Dad said they worked harder after I got back. The next year, we hired Mike and Ben. They were grateful for the opportunity. Several years passed, and business was booming. I made sure every vehicle was thoroughly inspected. I wasn't going back to jail. One day, I rushed Dad to the hospital. He had a heart attack. I called Gary, and he saw Dad before he died. As promised, I inherited the business and the trailer yard. I also got the house where I lived with Mandy and Dad. Gary got Dad's savings, stocks, and bonds, totaling almost $300,000. He left happy, having married a wealthy woman named Laura, who owned a real estate business. She was smart enough to have a prenup protecting her fortune. That's how I met my now wife, Liz. We met at a party hosted by Gary and Laura. Liz was beautiful, with a great body and nice legs. She would have been perfect for Gary. Too bad she was friends with Laura. She'd been married twice, divorced twice, and never had kids. She worked at an insurance office. Liz and I started dating and soon decided to get married. I incorporated the business to protect it. Liz brought about $400,000 into the marriage. She hoped I wouldn't mind having an advance on it. She thought we'd be together for life. But given her track record, we got a prenup. Needless to say, I didn't mind. It protected my assets, too. She had built up her savings from her ex's money. I cared for her a lot, but wasn't sure I'd call it love. I had too many trust issues. My first wife, Mandy, let me see my kids after I got out of prison. I was pleased they still called me Dad. I was now helping them both go to college. Life was going well. Business was great. Mike and Ben were my best friends, and I saw them often. I was married to a beautiful woman. Things were much better. A couple of months before that, Liz started acting strange. I thought it might be some female issue and left it at that, but kept my guard up. I told her that Mike, Ben, and I were going fishing for a few days. We'd be unreachable since we left our phones behind. We'd been fishing like this for the last 6 years, so this was nothing new. Just some time with the guys. I told her if there was an emergency, she could always call the Coast Guard. So far, that hadn't happened. The detective was talking to the tech operator. They were hoping to trace the number the kidnapper called from. They had been in contact long enough. Have we traced the phone? The detective asked. Yes, sir, but not very well. The caller used a burner phone, which you can buy almost anywhere. They're disposable. The tower that received the call was in downtown Cleveland. Can we narrow it down? The detective asked. Not really, just within a 5-mile radius of downtown Cleveland. That's not much, sir. Send 2 men to the motel and see if we can find out anything. Mrs. Smith, we need the motel's name and your room number. Maybe someone saw something, or the lobby monitor might have picked up something. Check if Gary Smith's car is in the parking lot. Mandy gave the officer the requested information and the make of his car. She was worried again and asked about the ransom. I stepped forward. I'm not giving a dime. If you want him so badly, pay the ransom yourself. We should let Laura know since her husband has been kidnapped. No, we can't call her, Mandy said. On the contrary, Mrs. Smith, we need to talk to her and find out what she knows, Detective Carter said. Besides, it's her husband. She deserves to know. Detective, let me call her. I'll have her come here, and you can interview her, I asked. Okay, but get her here quickly, Detective Carter said. Hi, Laura, it's Terry. Can you come to our house? We need to discuss something important, I asked. Does it have something to do with Gary? He's supposed to be in Pittsburgh, but he isn't there. Do you know where he is? Laura asked. No, I don't. The detective needs to talk to you, but not over the phone. Please hurry, I asked. Laura arrived 15 minutes later. I met her at the door and took her hand as she walked in. What's going on? Where's Gary? Is he okay? Laura asked. Mrs. Smith, Detective Carter said. Call me Laura since there are 2 Mrs. Smiths here. Where's Mandy? Laura asked. She went to the bathroom. Laura, what did you mean when you said your husband wasn't in Pittsburgh? Detective Carter asked. Do you know where he is? Why won't anyone tell me anything? Laura trembled. Laura, Gary has been kidnapped. Listen to me. The kidnappers thought it was me, but they took Gary by mistake. He's alive, but they're demanding a ransom. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Why would anyone kidnap Gary or even you? Gary? It doesn't make sense, Laura said. We need you to tell us everything that has happened in the last few days, the detective said. We've spoken to your husband for a few seconds, and we know he's alive. We're trying to find out where he's being held. Laura was nervous, but said she'd tell them everything she remembered. I've been wondering if Gary is cheating on me. He was supposed to go to Pittsburgh for a home remodeling show. He gave me his motel and room number and said he'd share a room with another vendor to cut costs. He's done this many times. This time, he seemed different, nervous. What makes you think he might have been cheating? The detective asked. He's been more aloof, too tired to make love. He's also been missing more than usual, usually for a day at a time. I needed to know for sure, so I planned to follow him to Pittsburgh. He left yesterday morning and said he'd be gone for 2 nights. He even called me when he arrived, but I had given his motel and room number to a private investigator. I needed to know if he was cheating. It cost me $1,000, but it would be worth it to find out he was faithful. The investigator called me this morning and said Gary wasn't there. He was checked into a motel, and the investigator talked to another man in the room who said Gary had another engagement. The investigator returned $500, saying he didn't feel he had earned it since he never saw Gary. Mandy walked into the room, eyes red from crying. Laura went to hug her, but Mandy held up her hands. What's going on? What's the matter, Mandy? First, you say my husband is being held for ransom, and now my best friend is crying and doesn't want me near her. What aren't you telling me? Terry, you never lied to me. What's going on? I handed Laura a beer and told her to sit down. I told her the whole story about the kidnapping and how they took Gary, thinking it was me. They thought it was me because my wife was with her husband. What? Gary and Mandy are having an affair? Laura looked at Mandy. You two-faced cheat. You comforted me and told me he wouldn't do that to me, and now I find out you're the one having an affair with him? Laura started to cry. I put my arms around her and pulled her close. When she calmed down, the detective asked if she had anything to add. Add? Is he kidding me? Gary gambled a lot and lost money. I don't know if that had anything to do with them wanting Terry, Laura replied. The detective asked if there was anyone I thought might try to kidnap me. Any enemies or someone who would know I had money? My business is worth a lot, but I don't have that kind of money readily available. It takes time to sell mutual funds and stocks. As for someone trying to get money, my brother probably set it up. Since he's sleeping with Mandy, he probably knows she has money. Mandy shrieked. He didn't do that. He loves me, and we were going away together. He never asked me for anything. You're just jealous of him. You always have been. Laura screamed. You can have him. He's been using me for years. He even took money from my account. After he comes back, I want nothing to do with him. Detective Carter asked everyone to calm down. We need to find the kidnappers and Gary Smith. Mrs. Smith, he looked at Mandy. We need to find a way to get the $300,000. Your husband won't help. Can you raise that amount? Laura, it's your husband. Do you have that kind of money? The detective asked. Laura looked at me. What should I do? Terry, I have a couple $100,000, but that's all I have left. He's my husband until I file for divorce. Don't spend a dime on him. He doesn't deserve it. He's been using you for years. He wants Mandy. Let him use your finances to bail him out, I said. That would take almost everything I have, Mandy replied. You're both horrible. He's your brother and your husband. Laura, don't you care? Mandy exclaimed. He's an idiot who cheated on a better woman. You want to save him? Then take action. Personally, I don't care anymore. Laura, I'll be ahead of you in line at the divorce court on Monday. Bring coffee for me, black with sugar. Laura said nothing, but tears were in her eyes. Detective Carter sent 2 officers with Mandy to gather the ransom. It was almost all she had left. Since we got married, I paid for everything. She bought personal items for herself, and now I suspect she gave Gary money or bought him gifts. When they returned with a satchel of money, I stood up and said I was leaving. You can't leave, said the detective. Why not? Either arrest me, or I'll go back fishing with my friends. I'll take my phone with me in case you need to call me about the funeral. I knew I said it harshly, but I didn't care. Laura told them she couldn't stay because of Mandy. She would go home, and the detective said he'd place a guard to watch her house until this ordeal was over. He would keep her informed. I looked at Mandy. I'll stay in the cabin for a couple more days. Once you get your lover back, move out of my house. Remember, it's mine. Detective Carter didn't know what to do with me. He had no reason to keep me, and my presence wasn't helping. His main concern was getting the hostage back safely. He walked me to my car and told me to stay alert. I told him I didn't really care, but thanks for his concern. I got in the car and headed back to the cabin. A few hours later, Mike and Ben returned with fresh pizza and beer. I told them everything. The next morning, I got in my boat and went fishing. As I passed the Coast Guard, I turned on my foghorn and waved. Something told me they were watching my boat. I made it easy for them. Mike was driving. By noon, we were back at the cabin. We put the fog siren back on in front of the Coast Guard. We didn't want to make their job harder. Around 3 p.m., a car pulled up to my driveway. Mike and Ben were just getting out. It was Detective Carter and 2 other detectives. You don't look dressed for camping or fishing. Why are you here? Were you able to save my brother? Detective Carter asked. I decided to tell you what happened this morning. We found your brother. He was shaken up, but will be okay. I think you were wrong about him being involved in the kidnapping, the detective said. I've known him all my life. He's always been about women and money. I stand by my assumption, I told the detective. You guys want a beer or a soda? A Coke would be nice. We're on duty, so no beer. Can we look around the cabin? Come on in. It's a bit messy since we didn't clean up after breakfast. We'll tidy up before the families get here. I laughed. The detectives glanced around while Carter continued. He explained what happened after I left and that morning. I didn't ask. but he wanted to gauge my thoughts. His detectives returned from the motel, and no one had seen anything. They said a man asked about the Bell's room and was told. The desk clerk didn't get a good look at him. They had people lined up in their rooms waiting to be evicted. Larry and Mandy had a room with access to the hallway and a glass wall to the street by the pool. They figured Larry was taken out the back door. They questioned several guests, but no one noticed anything. Larry's car was still parked at the motel. He must have left quickly because almost all his belongings were there, including his wallet, but no money or credit cards. They hoped the kidnappers would use them and get caught. The detectives sat down with us. I got chips and dip and drinks for everyone. Looks like you'll be here a while if you're telling me the whole story. You might want to grab something to eat. Sorry, no donuts. The detectives thanked me for the snacks. I sat back down and let Carter continue. He said the kidnapper called at 9 a.m. He wanted the lawyer to deliver the money to an abandoned mall in a dangerous neighborhood. So, my dear wife used her savings to pay the ransom for my brother? I asked. Yes, but we usually get the money back 80% of the time, Carter said. So, you got Larry home and the money back? Good job, I replied. We got Mr. Bell back, but the money is missing. The kidnappers had a plan. We were taken by surprise, Carter replied. You keep saying they, so you're sure there was more than one person? I asked. According to your brother, a few minutes after your wife left, there was a knock on the door. He thought she had forgotten something and opened the door. 2 masked men knocked him down and injected him with a drug. He woke up in a dark, dirty room with no windows. There was a bucket, 6 bottles of water, but no food. He tried to scream, but no one answered. There was an old mattress on the floor. I know you think he set this up, but I can't imagine him doing this to himself, Carter said. He was told to take a suitcase of money to an abandoned shopping center. The place looked like a war zone. He had to put the suitcase in the trunk of an old car, close it, and leave the premises quickly. The kidnappers said they had another trunk key. After checking the suitcase for dye packs or tracking devices, they'd call and tell us where to find Larry. Carter said he protested, but the kidnappers threatened to kill Larry if the money wasn't delivered by 10 p.m. We didn't like it, but we had no choice. We figured we could watch the building and the car and see who might come for the suitcase. So we agreed. Always follow the money. So, how did you save Larry and not get the money? I asked. I did as told and put the suitcase in the trunk of the old car. I got out quickly and headed back. Jim and Bob, he pointed to the detectives, hid across the street. They watched the building and the car the whole time. We waited until noon, but no one showed up. I began to worry. I had a device in the suitcase lining, and it showed it was still in the trunk. About half an hour later, Mrs. Bell got a call that the money had arrived and gave us the coordinates to find Larry. He was in an old loan office or bank vault. The main lock had been removed, but a large padlock was welded to the door. Larry couldn't get out. Jim used a sledgehammer to break the lock. Larry sat in the dark in his underwear, having drunk 5 of the 6 bottles of water. He was struggling to use the bucket in the dark. We questioned him, but he only remembered 2 masked men. When they let him talk on the phone, they covered his head. Other than that, he was alone. So, what happened to Mandy's money? Didn't you say the tracker showed it was still in the trunk? I asked. It's unbelievable. Jim went to find Larry, and Bob opened the trunk of the green car. The suitcase was still there, but all the money was gone. The old car had a false bottom, leading to a sewer manhole. Someone took the money from under the trunk and escaped through the sewer. We found the exit about 100 yards behind the shopping center. It was a deserted street full of dilapidated houses. We have nothing to trace the person or where they went. We don't know how many people were involved, except Larry said he was abducted by 2 men. An ambulance took your brother to the hospital, but the paramedic said he looked okay but very dirty and shaken. I followed your wife to the hospital to see him. Jim and Bob stayed at the scene for an hour looking for clues, but found nothing. We had the old car towed for inspection, but I doubt we'll find anything. Did you notify Laura? I asked. Yes, she thanked us and said she'd tell him she's filing for divorce. She was glad he was safe, but that was it. The detective stood up, and I thanked them for explaining everything. I wanted nothing to do with my brother. The best thing he could do was stay away. Carter asked if I knew anyone who might try to kidnap me. Detective Carter, I own a scrap metal recycling center and trailer yard. My two best friends were with me. My cousins ran the warehouse while we were gone. I have a few part-time employees, but no one wants to kidnap me. Mandy could hire someone, but what would she gain? Until yesterday, I bought her everything. She never spent a dime on me. I have a brother who's a money-hungry gigolo. I'd still bet on him. Time passed when Mike and Ben showed up with their families. Everyone seemed happy but uncomfortable because of Mandy. She had never been close to them. I told the guys I'd be staying in a motel for a couple of days. I told them to enjoy the cabin and my boat. I trusted them with everything. They were true friends. I'd be back in 2 days to dock the boat and close the cabin. I told them to enjoy their vacation and see them at work on Monday. I needed peace and quiet to think about my next move. I called Laura and invited her to dinner. She agreed. I met Laura the next day. She looked beautiful but sad. She always dressed like a businesswoman. We met at a restaurant for dinner. We drove separately. "Why did you want dinner, Terry?" she asked. "The last couple of days haven't been great, and I thought we could use a friend." "So, did you see Gary yesterday?" "Yeah, shortly after Mandy left. I can't believe a friend would do that. I never want to see her again." Gary tried to apologize, but I told him to go to hell. That was the last straw. First, he steals from me, then cheats with Mandy. I told him I'd file for divorce and press charges for stealing from my account. "God, I feel so foolish for marrying him," Laura said. "He was always a talker. I hoped he changed when he married you, but he hasn't. I'm seeing a lawyer on Monday, too. Want to come with me?" She smiled. "Your brother may be a talker, but you're a sweet man, always helping others. Larry has always been jealous of you." "What did he say about the kidnapping? Did he admit to setting it up?" I asked. Laura laughed lightly. "He said he had nothing to do with it. He said they were after you, but had no idea why. They were mad when they took him instead of you." "I'm confused. Is there something you know but aren't saying?" "Let's leave it at that for now. Talking about my brother makes me queasy. How about we go see a lawyer together?" "We can have lunch," I asked. "Terry, I've always cared for you. It's a shame I picked the wrong brother. But that doesn't mean we can't have dinner or lunch sometimes." I loved being with her. She was kind, genuine, and easy to talk to. I thought about her often, but wouldn't admit my feelings. We were both married and honored our vows. After the divorce, I hoped things would change. I returned to the cabin on Sunday, and Mike and Ben or their wives had cleaned up. They thanked me for the use of the boat. I told them they could use it any time. Their wives even hugged me. Mike and Ben had taken the boat back and secured it. I said goodbye to Ben and his family and told him I'd see him tomorrow, but would be late. I had to stop by the lawyer's office. I drove Mike and his family home since he didn't have a car. When it was just the three of us, I called Mandy on Sunday after I got back to the motel and told her to pack. I would be home Monday after work, and she better leave. It was a threat, but I didn't care. I doubt I would have done anything but kick her out. She wanted to talk about money and divorce. I told her it's all in the prenup. She'd get what she came in with. The house and everything in it stays with me. When she said most of her money was gone because of Larry, I replied that she should thank him, talk to him, and he might return some money. She got very angry. "You are horrible, pathetic. You'd let your brother die." I didn't do anything. Maybe if he hadn't entertained my wife, I would have considered helping him. Anyway, I'm seeing a lawyer on Monday. You will be served with divorce papers this week. Sign them. On Monday, after I got back from the lawyer's office, Laura called me at work. She said Gary stopped by her office and picked up his stuff from the house. He had a small trailer. She told him to take only his belongings. Laura mentioned Gary tried to apologize again, but she told him to leave. She'd mail the divorce papers to his office. As he left, she saw Mandy in a car following him. She thinks Mandy rented a truck, and Gary helped her. Laura said she told him I said if I ever saw him again, he'd be a dead man. She scared Gary. Laura told Gary and Detective Carter that she canceled all of Gary's credit cards in their names. She would no longer pay his bills. She told Carter because he was tracking the stolen credit cards. The case wasn't closed until the kidnappers were caught and the money recovered. Since they found Gary, the case was on the back burner. Things were back to normal at work. Laura and I had dinner at least twice a week. We both filed for divorce, and the lawyers said it would take about 90 days. We were surprised neither Mandy nor Gary contested. Of course, it would be a waste of money and time since we had prenups. Over the next month, Laura and I grew close. She confided in me that Larry had traveled to Las Vegas and forged her name to take over $100,000. She found out when he was supposed to be in Pittsburgh. She saw her savings statement. At first, she wanted to confront him, but then she suspected he had another woman. She found out both Abby and Larry were out of town that weekend. Abby said she was visiting her sister. I decided to get even but waited. Too little time had passed since the kidnapping. We found out Abby and Larry were living together outside of Cleveland, renting an apartment. Both were still working. We didn't know if they were happy. Laura said I should leave it alone. It was over. Laura told me Larry thought I was a fool for going to jail to protect Dad. There's no way he would have done that. She thought it was a heroic act for my sick father. I knew I was falling in love with her. I just liked being around her. Sometimes you feel at home around certain people. Laura made me feel that way. I asked her if she would marry me when our divorces were final. We hadn't made love yet, but I meant it. Terry, are you sure you want to do this? I'm probably not the best lover since my husband wants another woman, but she didn't say no and smiled. Our divorces will be finalized next month. Let's celebrate together, spend the night together, and then you decide. I already know how I feel, I replied. I didn't doubt my feelings for her. Being around her made me happy. A month passed. In the same week, we both received our divorce papers. Laura said she was going away with me for the weekend. I decided to take her to Pittsburgh. I made reservations at the Sheraton Inn. It was a great location to see the city. We left on Friday. I drove through Youngstown, crossed the Ohio River, and into West Virginia, then to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In Youngstown, I stopped for gas using my credit card. I then stopped by Chase Bank, but it was closed, so I made a large deposit in the overnight box. I told Laura I was going to deposit the money before I left, but since it was the same bank, I dropped it off. It was too much money to carry around. We had dinner at the Sheraton. It was wonderful. After dinner and drinks, we went up to the room and made love. The next morning, we explored the city, visiting the Carnegie Institute. After that, we went to a baseball game. We weren't Pirates fans, but decided to have fun like kids and had a great time. We had dinner again and went back to the hotel for cocktails and dancing. It was nice being together. It was hard to believe my brother could cheat on a woman like Laura. Beautiful, wonderful, fun, and a great lover. The next day, we headed back to Cleveland, passing through small towns. We stopped for shopping and sightseeing. I dropped her off at her house and told her I'd see her Monday after work. On Monday, she cooked dinner. The woman could cook too. After eating, there was a knock on the door. Laura answered. It was Detective Carter. Mrs. Smith, may I come in? I have a couple of questions. Of course, come in. Terry, Detective Carter is here. I entered, and he seemed surprised. Before you say anything, Laura and I see each other sometimes. This started after we found out about our ex's cheating, I told the detective. You are adults, and what you do is your business. I have a couple of questions about the credit cards you canceled. Do you have a list? Yes, I'll get it. Laura handed the list to Detective Carter. What's this about? Laura asked. I noticed you canceled a Chase card. Is that correct? Yes. Why? Laura asked. Your husband had another Chase card used last Friday at a gas station in Youngstown. Larry was in Youngstown on Friday at his office. He said he didn't use the card and that it was stolen. I only canceled cards I had duplicates of. I never knew he had another chase card. Was I on that card? No, he said he was the only one on it. He ordered a new card but didn't use it. What do you want from me? You can get a list of the cards I canceled. That's the best I can do. I'm sorry I can't help more, but it seems to be Larry's problem, not mine. You're right. I had to check the cards. The card was used to buy gas and make an overnight deposit. Someone put $100,000 into an account with a balance of $75,000. What? I asked. Someone put $100,000 into Larry's account. Who could have done that but Larry himself? Did you question him? Yes, he didn't know what to say. Your ex-wife was there, demanding answers. Gary just shut up and said he wouldn't answer. You may have been right about your brother, but we can't prove anything. We were tracking the stolen cards. Your brother said this card wasn't stolen, but wasn't sure. After the detective left, Laura looked at me. She wanted to talk. Terry, I care about you, but I have one problem, and it's a big one, Laura said. What's that? I'm sure we can solve it. It's the kidnapping. I think you know more than you've told me. If we get married, I need you to trust me. I don't want to go through another lie. What makes you think I know more? I smiled. Terry, we were in Youngstown on Friday. You got gas and stopped by Chase Bank to make a deposit. I know you had feelings for me, but we were both ready for marriage. I guess you found out about Mandy and Gary and set up the kidnapping so I could see what kind of man I was married to. What do you want to know? Did I know about it? Was I involved? Just the truth. I want to trust you, and you can trust me. You made that deposit knowing I would question it, Laura replied. It was a big step, but I trusted her more than anyone. She should trust me too. All right, I'll give you details. One of my clients thought he saw me in Las Vegas. He approached a guy who looked like me, hugging a woman. He said, "How are you?" "You stupid son of a gun." The guy got mad and told him to back off. He realized it wasn't me. I showed him a picture of Mandy and asked if she was the woman. He said yes, and I told him it was my brother and his wife. He said, damn, he was all over her. I called Abby's sister, and she'd never been there. So I knew Abby went to Las Vegas with Larry. I figured you paid for the trip. I paid for her airfare to her sister's. I checked Abby's account, but she didn't withdraw money, so I decided to get even. I enlisted a few close friends. The rest is history. You would have let him die? Laura asked. Of course not, but I wanted him to suffer. I despise him, but he's my brother. I hoped you wouldn't help bail him out. I was surprised Mandy gave the money, but she thought she'd get it back. Why did you give him the money on Friday? I threw away all his credit cards except one in his name. After you canceled them, I checked and found the balance was $75,000. I figured he took that money from you. A card with that money, I knew he'd report it missing or get a duplicate but wouldn't tell you. I bought gas with it so Detective Carter would know. I put the money in his account. He's greedy and wouldn't deny it. I figured it would ruin the relationship between Larry and Abby. She'd always believe it was her money, and it is. I laughed. There's no way he'd explain it. What did you do with the rest of the money? Laura asked. I didn't need any. I bought stock in my company for two friends who helped me, $50,000 each, and put it in their names. They own 4% of my company. I told them not to mess with it for a while. They liked having a stake. The last $100,000 I held for you. That's the money Larry stole. You should put it in the real estate account. Laura didn't know what to say. I was the criminal who kidnapped her husband. What to do with me? I was honest and told her the truth. She knew I did it to get back at Abby and Larry and helped her. I didn't take any money. Well, I've told you everything. It's up to you to decide if you can trust me. I love you, Laura, and want you in my life, and I promise not to lie to you. She kissed me, walked me into the bedroom, and we made love. We married 2 weeks later. We rented a cabin and had the wedding there. It was lovely. Mike and Ben and their families were there, as well as my staff. Laura's parents were there. I met her sister and other relatives and a few people from her work. It was too cold to swim, but everyone went for a boat ride. No one mentioned Abby or Larry or the kidnapping, but I saw Laura hugging Mike and Ben. She knew who my real friends were. There was a lot of food and music at the wedding. Laura and I knew we were surrounded by true friends and family. Her parents were surprised that I looked like Larry until Laura told them he was my twin. After everyone left, Laura and I took a moonlit boat ride. We spent 4 days fishing and enjoying each other's company. Laura and I had a tentative agreement, but it was for business only. I owned my parts warehouse, and she owned her real estate business. Everything else we shared. I sold my house and Laura sold hers. We bought a condo together to start fresh. It was wonderful to come home to Laura. Sometimes we had dinner out, sometimes at home. Mike and Ben's wives became Laura's best friends. Since Laura couldn't have children, we often watched their kids. We were Aunt Laura and Uncle Terry. We are now considering adoption. As far as we know, Larry and Abby are no longer together. Larry moved out of state, which was fine with me. Laura said she saw Abby a few times on business trips. She had gained weight and was seeing someone from her insurance firm. She never talks to her and shakes her head when she sees her. We never heard back from Detective Carter, so I guess the kidnapping case is closed.